Okay, and we are live. So, welcome to our BOA Career Session today. Our today's topic is leadership, and we will receive first-hand information, anecdotes, and experiences and advice from Andy Bird, our guest for today. Andy is a very experienced and successful CEO who right now works at Pearson, but already worked in very interesting companies during his career. We will have a Q&A session in the end. So to all of you guys, if you have questions, something you always wanted to ask a CEO, today is your chance. Just post your questions in the chat window you see below, and we will get back to it later on. Don't worry if you can't see any questions because the chat window is set on private, but we, Jill, Andy, and me are able to see your questions. Jill from BOA, you see also here, my colleague, is your go-to person if you have any technical problems. You're welcome to ask Jill via the chat. And me, I'm Mathilde Cabenda. I'm your host for today. I work at ZEIT Online, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Andy Bird today.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, Andy. We had a small chat before, and you told me that you're in New York right now, right?
Yes, I'm in New York. Guten Tag. It's a lovely day here. It's interesting. I spent 12 months. So next week I celebrate 1 year as being CEO of Pearson. And for the most part of that 12 months, I've been doing it virtually through a camera. So I'm like your virtual CEO, and it's only in the last few weeks that I've had the opportunity to go and travel. So I was in London last week and New York now, and then back to London on Wednesday, Paris, London, New York, Los Angeles. I think that's my life over the next 2 weeks.
That involves a lot of traveling and also some dealing with change of times, right?
Yes, look at me, look how tired I am. And a lot of forms to fill and a lot of COVID tests to take.
Yeah, this is our times now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you just mentioned Pearson. Before we dive deeper into leadership and your career, I will also want to talk about Pearson and about our sponsor for today. I don't know if everybody here knows Pearson, but Pearson is a quite huge company. Pearson is the leading company for learning, and it's providing a lot of different ways, learning information for tens of millions of people all over the world, with e-learning tools, with e-libraries, with learning courses, with workbooks, and many more. I think we will talk about this with Andy as well. Pearson's head office is in London, as far as I know, but you have more than 20,000 employees in nearly 200 countries, right?
Yes.
So I know that Germany, you have an office as well, because I already had contact with your colleague in Munich. So
that's right.
Very international company, and also a traditional company, right?
It's really interesting, and maybe we'll talk about the transformation. Pearson, many of you will know as an educational textbook company, and really we're on a journey to become a digital media learning company. And there's a very important difference in that. We're becoming more engaged with consumers. We've just launched a direct-to-consumer product in the US. There's a lot of analogies between what Pearson does and music and media. At the heart of Pearson is intellectual property. It used to take the form of a textbook, and that textbook became an e-text. And now what I really am fascinated about is how we can introduce gamification, video, animation, virtual reality into the world of learning and really expand all of our horizons. So it's an interesting and an exciting time to be at Pearson.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I think it's really interesting how the pandemic and also digitalization changes the way we learn, the way we work, and also the way we lead. I think there's a lot of connections where we talk about later on. And what I really think is an interesting fact that Pearson is not only an education company, but you also own well-known brands such as Financial Times, Penguin Books, and also Baywatch. Is that right?
We used to. We used to. Now the company has an interesting history. It started in construction 177 years ago. It actually built the tunnels that link, if those of you have been to New York, the Midtown and Lincoln tunnels, the Pearson built those tunnels. We used to own everything from Chateau Lafite wine to the Financial Times, to Madame Tussauds, to The Economist, and Penguin Random House. But over the past few years, my predecessors disposed of those assets. And so now we're really focused purely on education.
I see. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Before we get to know you better, Andy, we have a little poll prepared for our audience today. Unfortunately, we are too many to see every face and talk with every person in person, but we can communicate with our attendees today via chat and also via poll. So we would like to start with a little poll to get to know our audience better and to get a better understanding of their needs. So we would like to know from you guys whether you have already gained some leadership experience in a private context or in a job context, or if this is new, but maybe something you aspire. We will wait 1 or 2 minutes for all of you to answer it.
That's really cool. Real-time data.
Yes, and maybe my colleague Jill or Zina, you could maybe help one of our attendees, Lena. She's asking. She seems to be dealing with some technical problems. Okay, but I think most of you answered our poll, so let's take a look at the results.
Interesting. 50% have worked leadership experience privately, 25% in a job, and 25% of you are still figuring it all out.
Yeah, it's a mixed field, but we see that the majority or half of the people here already gained leadership experience in a private context, and probably you thinking about getting deeper into that field. So we will hope to provide some useful information for you today. Andy has a lot of experience with leadership, so I'm sure he can give you some nice advice if you want to improve your own leadership skills. And to do so, maybe we should take a closer look at Andy and Andy's career. Andy has, I think, about 35 years of leadership experience already.
Old man.
Yeah. Well, you don't look that old, so I'm positive that you have many more years to come.
I hope so.
You have a quite illustrious career in especially media industry, which is interesting. We talked about it before, that you even worked for Viva Germany. Which probably everybody here knows quite well, but you also worked for very famous, well-known brands such as Disney International, Time Warner, right? You worked for Virgin Records. So you have got a lot of experience in different companies in media industry and also in music industry, as you mentioned. But I think your early beginning of your career was in radio broadcasting.
Yes. So when I was 17, I was at school in Manchester, England, and I was working in a supermarket. I used to work in the warehouse in the supermarket, and I was listening to the radio. And I think, talking of leadership, some people often ask, what do you think is the most important quality
Yes.
that you can have as a leader? And my answer is curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
You should be, good leaders are always curious. And I was fascinated by radio and the ability for the DJs to paint pictures with words. And I love music. I grew up with sort of the end of punk music, and then New Order. Every night you would see me at the Hacienda nightclub in Manchester, which was a really great place. There's a film called 24-Hour Party People, which you should watch, and that is my life. I'm actually in that film for about 2 seconds, but I applied for a job at the radio station, and it's one thing to be curious. The most important thing is then to act upon your curiosity, do something about it. So I was curious about radio, and so I wrote a letter and I applied, and I started working in the radio station, and I was hooked. I didn't know what I was going to do. And when I was there, I taught myself how radio worked. I taught myself how to DJ and mix back with vinyl records. And I went through university. I did English at university, but I already knew that I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew that radio and music was what I really enjoyed. It's also, I have 2 sons who are 25 and 27. And I think I say to them, when you're in your 20s, there is a lot of pressure to have life figured out. And in your 20s, that's exactly the time when you should experiment and do things. And, very few people actually have the answer. So what you're really looking for is finding something you're really passionate about. So be curious, try lots of things, act upon your curiosity, and try and find something that you're passionate about. When you're passionate about something, you'll just invest more of yourself into whatever it is, and you'll find you'll do very well at it. And so I spent my time figuring out that, and I discovered it was music and radio, and that's how I started.
Yeah. That's an interesting point to look at your passions. No? Because sometimes people think, well, it's my hobby to do music or dance or whatever. But I think it's really useful to take this look at it the way you do, because if we enjoy doing something, we are usually good at it, right?
Yes.
So I was wondering, was this also the reason why you started to study literature, English literature?
No, honestly, I had decided I did English language and literature. I went to a university in Newcastle. The only reason I did English was because I only had to do 8 hours a week of lectures, even though I had to read many books. And the second reason why I went to Newcastle is there was a television program called The Tube, and it was a bit like Formula 1. For those of you back in the day, I used to, by the way, when I joined Virgin, I would take video tapes of videos every week and fly to Munich to deliver the tapes for the Formula 1 show. And so there was a show called The Tube, and this was about the time of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, that type of Duran Duran, Culture Club. And I would spend all my time in just volunteering in the television studio. And I honestly wasn't the greatest student. And English allowed me to do something. I love reading, I love literature. And so I could read and I could gain more experience in the area where I was very passionate.
Yes, I see. So, if we look at CEOs, I guess most of them usually study something like economics or management or maybe law. What would you say? Was it a barrier that you didn't study something management connected, or what impact did it have on your career?
I didn't have any formal training, although I invest a lot of my personal time, and it's appropriate. Pearson, as you say, we're the world's leading learning company, and I'm learning all the time. Every day, I'm learning something new, and so while I didn't have any formal training, I invested a lot of my time as I went through this leadership career. Firstly, I never imagined when I was 20 years old that I would even be living in London, um, or that I would, have the opportunity to start a Cartoon Network, which I was very fortunate enough to do at Turner, or to move my family to Los Angeles and spend 15 years working at Disney, or then joining Pearson. And life is a journey, and I think it's hard. Oftentimes, it never goes to plan. But I work hard, I study hard, and that means just work intently. It doesn't mean work for long periods of time. And as I say, I follow my curiosity and my passion.
Yes, I see. Okay. So when we go back to your youth, you mentioned your first working experiences and your passions for music. Um, did you always had this idea in mind or this desire to lead, or was it something that grew over the years?
It kind of grew organically. I guess, was better and better with my job. I was given more responsibility. I guess my bosses trusted me. And then with that responsibility, I started to lead and manage small teams of people. And I have to be honest, I wasn't very good, because I was promoted because I was good at my job. But when I was promoted, I wasn't given any of the support to understand how to manage people. And that was something that I didn't appreciate at the time. I think I hope I've now got a little better at managing people. But sometimes you are promoted because technically you are very good at what you do, but then you're not supported with all the skills that you need to become a true leader. And so that was something that I think I learned in sort of my 30s into my 40s, I guess. And honestly, I'm still learning every day. You still try to improve yourself and think about how one could be doing things better and differently.
I think what you described is quite typical for many leaders who grow into this position via being good at what they did before. And I would like to know whether you have some advice for people who experience the same, how to learn more, how to get the knowledge you need to lead people.
Watch life, which sounds weird. I think particularly in today's world, we're attached to a device like this. Our entire world is electronic, and it's fantastic. The technology that we have at our disposal. But I've learned so much by just watching other people, observing life, and learning from the good and the bad from what you see. If you're working at a company, look at how your bosses and your co-workers work. I would spend a lot of time, I'd just sit and look and observe and learn. I was very, very fortunate that I had three inspirational bosses. So the first at Virgin was Richard Branson, and he really instilled in me the notion that you have to create a fun work environment. You know, if you have an environment where people feel free to express themselves, they're going to be more creative, they're going to actually be more productive. And his role as leader was to be very innovative, to think differently. But we had so much fun, always spontaneous fun. A lot of the time when Viva was starting and I was on the board at Viva, Dieter Gorney and the team, Viva, I loved. I used to go to Colm and be with the Viva team, and it was just a fun place to be. It was a cool place to be, and people had fun. So under Richard Branson, I learned about that, and then I had 10 years working for a great visionary American leader called Ted Turner. So most of you know Ted Turner from cable news network. He owned a local television station in Atlanta, and he discovered satellites. And he realized that he could take his local television station, put it on a satellite, and broadcast to the world. And then he saw, before anyone else, the impact of that technology and the role that news had in informing society. So he said, I'm going to start a cable news network. What should I call it? Cable News Network, CNN. And then I joined after Ted had bought Hanna-Barbera. And he had this vision of creating a cartoon network. What should I call it? Cartoon Network. And so he was very straightforward, very smart and perceptive. And he would always kind of had a great attention to detail. I think as a leader, it's very important. You're looking at the big picture, but you also have to focus on a lot of the details. And then my final boss, probably my own most influential boss, was Bob Iger, who up until recently was the CEO of the Walt Disney Company. When I joined Disney, I joined to work for Bob before he became CEO himself. And Disney was not in a great place back in 2003, 2004. And we went on an amazing journey and really to understand the power of the consumer, the power of brand, and to make some bold decisions in life. By the way, Bob wrote a wonderful book called Ride of a Lifetime, which is about leadership and about his time at Disney. So if any of you are interested in Bob's story and what it's like to run the Walt Disney Company and leadership, because Bob's an amazing leader, then I can thoroughly recommend Ride of a Lifetime.
I just noted it down. Yeah, thank you for this advice. Were there any other maybe role models you had earlier in your life, or was the role model aspect of great leaders something you discovered later on in your career?
I think it covered. I think I learned, as I say, as I went along. I think you learn a set of values as well. So we've talked about passion, we've talked about curiosity. Respect is very, very important as a leader. People they need to trust you. You really look up to leaders, whether it's the leader of a sports team, a football team, or a leader of a country. And in most instances, you follow good leaders if you respect them. If you don't follow them. And so earning respect is very, very important, because with respect, you earn trust. And so I spend a lot of time, trying to listen. Listening is a very important attribute as well. Listen and observe, be very respectful, and don't rush. I learned this from Bob about, sometimes it's good just to sit back and think about things. And that's what you need to do as a leader, is to not be too impulsive. So there's no one when I was very young, I think I was like anyone else, but I was very fortunate, as I say, to just look and observe and take the good and the bad from people and be prepared to learn and improve.
You mentioned the importance of respect that you need from your employees. And this brings me to one of our attendees' questions. Elena is asking, how do you deal with your own mistakes in front of your colleagues as a leader? And I think there's also a connection to respect, right? Because they need to see that you are a trustworthy person.
Yes, well, thank you for the question, Elena. You're right. We all are going to make mistakes, and you have to be transparent and honest. And I think, in the world of media and creativity, you are always going to make a mistake. I remember at Disney was making a film, and if you think about making a movie, it's a $300-400 million investment in one product. And I remember the head of the studio coming in. We always used to have lunch together every Monday, all the different heads of the businesses. There were 12 of us who sort of ran the Walt Disney Company. And we'd always have lunch every Monday and talk about everything that was going on in the company. And I remember the head of the studio coming and saying, "We've made a massive mistake with this film for a number of reasons." And I was really thought, to admit that and to seek help was a really good attribute. Another example, which I think is you have to be prepared to kind of show a bit of your vulnerability, but you are still the leader. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Another example, by the way, there is a wonderful book on creativity and leadership by a wonderful guy called Ed Catmull. And Ed Catmull was one of the co-founders of Pixar Animation. And he really was at the forefront of creating 3D animation. And creating a Pixar movie is a very lonely process. If you're a director, it takes 3 or 4 years, and it's very, very lonely. And they had a notion called a brain trust. So at any time, any director in Pixar can kind of hit the imaginary red button and say, "I have a problem. I have a problem, help." And everyone else would stop doing what they're doing to come and help this person fix a problem. And I thought that was a really, really great way of showing leadership, but also honesty and respect. It's like, okay, if I help this person now, that person will then come and help me in the future.
Yes, true. Yeah. We have another question, but I might get later back to that because it's really personal and related to Disney. But we have another one here from Anastasia. She's asking, how do you manage to keep a healthy relationship with your employees?
I think being honest and transparent and respectful. In today's world, it's about engagement. So, and accessibility. So I spend a lot of time engaging with employees through anyone in the company, or any one of the 22,000 employees can reach me directly. They can email me, they can message me. I don't hide behind anything. I have a page on our intranet called Ask Andy, and employees can ask me any question. I read it, I answer back myself. I don't have anybody do it for me, because I think authenticity is important. They understand the real me. If I know the answer, then I'm going to provide my answer and perspective. So I think that's very important to engage, particularly when we're doing so much of this through webinars and Zoom and everything. This is part of our life now. So engaging and learning and listening to your employees is really important. I will gather. I used to love when, and I still do it whenever I'm physically in an office, is I would go on what's an Australian term called walkabout. So if I'm in an office every day, I will walk every single floor and stop by the cubicles or desks, and just chat. And you learn so much about what employees are thinking. And so I'm trying to, be in an active listening mode so that I can better, help the employees succeed. The future of successful companies, companies used to be measured on their financial capital. I think great companies of the future will be measured on the success of their human capital, on the people who work for the companies and the products that they then go deliver. So investing in that side is really important to me.
Yes. I was reading, and while I was listening, I was thinking that what you mentioned is important, and I guess your employees respect that very, very, very much. But I guess it's also pretty time consuming. Ask any question of the 20,000 employees. You were mentioning the traveling from one country to another in 1 week. So how do you deal with work-life balance? And this was one question of the audience, but I also noted something quite similar down. I was wondering, when you finished work and it's your free time, how do you switch off all the probably very important thoughts that go out through your head, and how do you switch to a private mode? Do you have some everyday routines or some advice for our attendees? Because I guess this is a issue we all deal with, especially during COVID times and pandemic, and especially leaders who have so many important decisions to make and so many people to lead. How do you deal with this balance?
It's a great question. I mean, and firstly, I think we've all experienced the pressures on mental health during the pandemic. This has been tough on all of us. And so, firstly, for all of you, look after yourselves, and your mental health is very, very important. And I think I have done that, and we spend a lot of time doing that at Pearson with our employees. But more generally, I think you can become overwhelmed, and so you have to be very disciplined. And I do that in a couple of ways. One of the interesting things that someone taught me early on, I'm trying to think who it was. It may have been in the Turner days, was managing your inbox of email. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how quickly you can run away with just hundreds and hundreds of emails or messages or anything. And so I set up time. I'm going to look now and tell you. So I have 11 emails in my inbox, of which 4 have come in while we've been talking, 4 or 5. I set out time every morning and every afternoon to just manage my professional life so I don't get overwhelmed. And I do that. So the first thing I will do when I finish this webinar, I have half an hour of nothing. The first thing I will do is go and manage my emails, see which ones I can respond to, which ones I'll leave till later, or which ones I can just delete. There's so much rubbish. And so, but managing my inbox has been the most amazing thing, and giving myself time to do that during the workday is really important. The other reason it's important is you need time to think. As a leader, you need time to reflect and you need time to think. And therefore, when you do that, you can contribute. And so if I was going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, I've got no time to think and very little time to contribute. So my assistant knows that I will do one meeting back to back, and then I'm going to have a gap. And then I'll do another meeting, then I'll have a gap, and then I'll have lunch, and then we'll have the afternoon. That's very important as a leader, because you don't, and as a worker, you don't measure productivity in terms of time. You measure productivity in terms of effort. You know, when I'm working, I work very hard, even if it's for 30 minutes, then I have time to think. And then finally, to your question, you know, when I finish work, that's it. Close the book, there's tomorrow. So, you know, it's really important that you treat your life as the antithesis of work. It's part of work, and try not to take work with you. It's not always possible, but I try to stop. You know, I still DJ. I love listening to music and mixing, and I find that really, you know, I put my headphones on and I start mixing and I'm in a different world. Or I love watching sport. So I'll watch sport or go and spend time with Caroline, my wife, and just do something different. And then there's always tomorrow. There's always tomorrow.
Yeah, true. We already have some more questions. And as I figure that most of the questions relate to things you are saying right now, I will make a mix of audience questions,
Cool.
my questions, because they are quite similar. So there's another one I think many people are interested in, and this is advice from you, the experienced CEO Andy, to students or young professionals here who aim to achieve what you have already achieved, who want a career, for instance, at Disney or in management or in leadership. Is there something they should reconsider, something they should learn, some general advice of skills that are important for doing the things you do?
Yes, I've mentioned some of the, you know, curiosity, passion,
Yes.
find your passion. You know, as I say, you know, my two sons are 25 and 27. And as I said before, the 20s is just go experiment. And, you know, there is, I think, in today's world, too much pressure to have life figured out when you're 22 or 23 years old. The truth is, when I was 22, I had no idea that what I was going to do. I had no idea I would end up, you know, some 35 years later doing this and talking to you guys. So that, you know, life, you know, it's you know, if you want to be a brain surgeon, then probably figuring out you want to be a brain surgeon is good when you're young. But most of us are not going to be brain surgeons. And life is changing. So be flexible, be curious, experiment, try things. It's okay to fail. Failure, particularly to try something, it doesn't work. So what? Go do something else. It's much better to fail when you're in your 20s than it is in your 30s, 40s, or 50s. You know, so never be afraid to fail. And finally, you know, people say, you know, I go back to, I was in the supermarket, I was 17 years old. And back then, there was a lot of friction in the process of communication because there was no email, there was no mobile phones or anything like that. So I had to get a typewriter out and I had to type a letter, put it in the post. That had to go to the radio station. The secretary opened the letter, read the letter, gave it to her boss. The boss read the letter. The boss told the secretary to type a response. She did that, put it in an envelope, it went back to me, etc. That's a really painful process. It's not like you IM someone and, you know, it's all done. it was a really, there was a lot of friction. And I'm amazed how many people don't act on their curiosity. You have to work and be, what's the worst that could have happened to me? I got no response, but at least I tried. And I hear so many times people say, so why don't, and I said, how hard did you try? And if you want to try for a job or you want to try for a position, do your research, do your homework. If you want to go work at Disney, then go look at the website, figure out what you like, figure out the Disney office in Germany. I think now they were moving offices, so I think it's in it may be now in Munich still, I believe, and there'll be careers there. And figure out what they have and write a letter, write an email, find out who's the head of HR. What's the worst thing that can happen? You get no response. You've wasted 15 minutes of your life or something like that. I don't think it's a waste. I think it's important. Too many people are not prepared to put the effort in to really advance themselves. And you find leaders are generally the people who have gone that extra mile, that extra step, and put in the effort. So those are some initial thoughts. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, I think it is. And you mentioned earlier the importance of being honest and also talking about failures. And there were two questions asking more or less the same. If you would share some personal failure you did in the past as a leader and something you would learn from it or recommend to our audience.
It's a great question, a really good question. We all, as I say, we all make mistakes. We all have failures, even with the best of intentions. Let me think. I mean, a good example at Disney, actually, we launched a product for direct to consumer. It was like the first version of Disney Plus. And it was an idea I had maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I thought, this is a no-brainer. We need to, Netflix had started, and I thought that Disney needed to have its own service. And I thought, we have all the content, and we are one of the world's greatest marketing companies. We have this great brand. I'm sure we can do the technology, but I underestimated our skills. And even though we were great at marketing for movies, we could market a Marvel movie or Star Wars or something like that. We were terrible at marketing digitally to direct to consumer. We didn't have the skills. And I underestimated that. And I thought we must have the technology. And we didn't. And I said, but we've got great product. And the truth is, how many times can you watch The Lion King? We needed original product. So I completely underestimated the skills that we had in Disney. And the original, it was called Disney Life. It was launched in England, in the UK, and it wasn't successful. But what was interesting out of that, and it was great leadership from Bob Iger, was a lot of people would just have gone, oh, that's terrible, that Andy Bird, what a terrible idea. It was awful. He didn't. He went, that's really interesting. We've learned a lot. Now, how do we learn from those mistakes? How do we learn from this failure? And how do we make everything better? So Disney went out and bought a technology company called Bantech. It started to get, expertise in direct to consumer and marketing, and started to build original series like Mandalorian, and then could launch Disney Plus, and it becomes a great success. So you can learn a lot from failure. And so I'm never ashamed of if you try things. I always say, you think of medicine and drugs. I think it's amazing that, drugs, the vaccine, comes out of many, many failures. You try to get a drug for something and you fail and you fail and you fail, and then you get it and you save lives. And we can take that idea and apply it to our own. Never be afraid of failing. As long as you learn, as long as you are open and honest, it's really good. So that's one thing that comes to my mind.
Yes, I think that's helpful as well. And I figured that we always come back to the importance of learning, especially as a leader. When it comes to learning, we have one question of Sebastian here, and he is asking if you have recommendations for current students on how to efficiently network or build long-term relationships that might be beneficial for your management career. Do you have some advice for him?
Yes, Sebastian. It's really important to, as I say, look outside and now you have the tools, whether it's a LinkedIn or Slack or Instagram. There are many different ways of expanding your curiosity. I'm really fascinated by what is happening with technology. There are a couple of examples, I think. Well, we'll come on to the technology in a moment, but I think we have the social tools now that you can expand your network, as it were. And I encourage you to do that. And if you find someone who's interesting, follow them on Instagram or follow them on Twitter, or even on TikTok, which I think is a really interesting platform. And if you're super curious, then reach out to that person. The worst thing that can happen is they ignore you, but they may not, and you may then be able to expand your relationships when you're actually at work. As I say, just be curious and be respectful and just, most people, if you ask them a question, do you mind me asking, how do you do this or how do you do that? They'll be very happy to answer. Too many people don't do that. Too many people don't act on the curiosity. And then, be up to date and up to speed with technology. I marvel at my sons. I wish, we were saying earlier, God, I really wish I was 35 years younger, because I think what is amazing, what is going to happen, with the metaverse, which is what's already happening with like Fortnite, and you can drop marshmallow into the game, and now they're putting learning experiences into Fortnite. What the impact of virtual reality is going to be. Imagine we could all meet in a room together as avatars, and that's already kind of happening. The next generation of Slack, how you use the technology that is in TikTok, and they're actually doing this. The split screen technology, how you use that for learning. How do you deconstruct a 60-minute lesson or lecture and put it into 60 seconds and create episodic learning? So this technology is moving at a fast pace. And so I think utilizing it, whether it's for networking or socializing, or just satisfying your curiosity, just dive in, go down a rabbit hole. Those times in the day that I say you leave to be free, yes, do your email, keep on top of your email, but go dive down a rabbit hole, go just discover something.
And what is your favorite tool or way to do networking? Because I figured out you're not on LinkedIn, aren't you? So maybe there's different ways or some different formats you prefer.
Yeah, I really I do like Instagram. I spend a fair amount of time on Telegram. I've been on Telegram for quite a while. I'm not a big Facebook fan. Back in the day, my kids kind of moved me off of that. What else do I have? I'm trying to think that I spend most of my time. A bit of WhatsApp in terms of social networking. Line, I use Line a fair bit. Those are some of the tools. I wasn't on. It was interesting. I was on LinkedIn when I was at Disney, and what happened is there was lots of, not to do with me, it was because of Disney. Lots of people started impersonating me. So there were lots of fake me's around. So we decided to take me off of that, and the other executives as well. I will be opening a Pearson LinkedIn account, so I shall appear in Pearson. I think there's probably less interest. Did you know there was once, this is true, an Andy Bird children's clothes store in Pakistan?
Who
It
knew?
appeared on the web. They knew they couldn't call it Disney. So they took inspired by Andy Bird from Disney. They did an online e-commerce site, and there was a physical store that was selling children's clothes, and it was named apparently after me. That's the power of Disney. It's the power of that company. It's an amazing company.
Yeah. I think that means that you have to deal with problems most of the people here probably don't have, but it's interesting what impact also the appearance online can have, and this big love so many people have for Disney and for the big brands we worked for.
Well, also about sorry, Mathilde. It's also about we've got to use your judgment. These are great tools if they're used correctly.
Yeah.
But as we've found, particularly in the United States, sometimes they're not used correctly, and we've got to be very careful. I think all of us have a debt to society to really think about the impact these tools have on future generations, particularly when it comes to learning and education.
Exactly. This brings me to my next question. We have, I think, 18 months of pandemic experience now. What would you say, how does COVID-19 change the way we worked and also the way we have to lead?
That's a great question. I think COVID, in many ways, I mean, it is tragic in so many levels, and we've all experienced, the heartbreak and the trauma, the pandemic, and all the way through to kind of just the isolation and the mental stress that we talked about earlier. But through it, I think there's some really important, encouraging things that have happened. Not least discovery of the vaccine and how everyone came together in such a fast time to try and develop the pandemic. I also think it will be really interesting I think about this a lot, in 10 years' time or in 20 years' time, how will people look back at history and how will they look at this time? I mean, it is, we kind of discovered things in real time as the pandemic grew around us. I think we've all altered as a society in terms of how we interact. I think how we value learning has also been impacted. The importance of learning to society, the importance of technology. I think hopefully, in many ways, it'll bring us closer together as society, and we now start to think about things like the climate and climate change and some important social impact endeavors. I think we're going to live in a different world as it comes to leadership, in terms of I'm going through this at the moment. What is the role of an office? In today's world, when you can do so much of your work via a camera, do you need to have? It's not about hot desking. It's about we've actually redesigning some of our offices so they become centers for collaboration, connectivity, so you connect with each other, and creativity. Sort of, I call it 3 C's. And so we've got to learn, I think we've all learned how to adapt. And as a leader, you need to adapt all the time. Life is constantly moving forward, and you need to constantly adapt and learn and be prepared to change. Don't be afraid of change. Change can be, scary in many ways, but don't be afraid of it. Lean into change, and I hope I'm always. That's another thing as a leader. You should always be optimistic. You never want to go into a room and the leader, oh, this is rubbish. This is never going to work. That's never inspiring. So I think also as a leader, you have to you have to be. The glass is always half full, and I think you've always got to be optimistic about our future.
Yeah. That's good to think positive about also the struggle we went through in the last month. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I would love to ask so many more questions, but I know that you are a busy man too. So we have to come to an end, unfortunately. But before I leave our attendees today, I will still want to give you some advice because, as you know, Andy Bird is working for Pearson Education now, and Pearson Education also has a really, really good workbook for people like you who are interested about leadership. And I already read another leadership or another workbook of Pearson's, and what makes the workbooks so special is that they give really practical advice, not only theory, but real tips and tools from a very holistic view of leadership. And I think there you can dive deeper into the whole field of leadership and the skills required to be a good leader, in addition to all the very useful advices Andy gave us today. And also, we would love to get your feedback to this session, about this session, but also about future webinars we are planning to do. It will only take 2 minutes of your time, but if you could take the time and give us honest feedback, we would really appreciate it. The link is posted in the chat window right now, or you can use the QR code and use your mobile phone just to give us a quick feedback. That would be great. And also, you might have realized that this session is recorded. So all of you will receive a wrap-up email some days after the event where you will receive the recording. But we will also give you the link to buy the workbook we mentioned about leadership. And I guess you also have a chance to win some if you're interested. So stay in touch with us and read the email. Andy, is there something you would say in the end to our audience?
Well, firstly, Mathilde, thank you so much for hosting this session. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you all for participating. I hope there is something of interest for you. I think the fact that you decided to join this session shows that you're already on that journey to leadership because you self-selected. I don't think you were forced to spend an hour with me. So that's good that you clearly have an interest, a passion in this. So that's an important first step. Finally, if any of you have questions that we didn't have time to answer, then please feel free to reach out to me. It's fairly straightforward, andy.bird@pearson.com. And then I can do my best to answer any questions that we didn't have time to cover now. But Mathilde, thank you so much for organizing this and hosting this, and thank you all for taking the time out of your day to spend an hour listening to this guy from New York who used to work in a supermarket.
You used to work in a supermarket and in so many inspiring companies doing such a great work. Thank you a lot for taking your time share your thoughts with us. I think it was really inspiring. I also took some notes. I guess everybody does. So thank you a lot. I hope you have a good day. In New York, it's still in the morning, so you have a nice, long, sunny day to come.
Yes.
Thank you a lot.
Very much so. Thank you all. Thank you again. Thanks.
Bye-bye.